Another, I guess, hard part for me is deciding what I want to do, and then making that first mark. And I know a lot of artists talk about that, like when you have a white canvas or a white piece of paper in front of you, how do we do something to kind of get things started? So once I've got it started and I have decided what's worth spending my time painting, I get really into it, and I really just kind of love doing the act of painting. It's creative, you're building things, it's experimental. I was painting a little bit and started getting some of these drips going in some of my paintings, and it was completely by accident, and it ended up being one of my favorite things about some of my paintings, that I just started intentionally adding them to the paintings and then putting little dots on top of them. So the experimental creative part of actually creating something is probably my favorite part of art. My name is Madalyn Davidson, and I am an artist. So from a very young age, I was always really interested in creating things. So I would kind of lock myself away in my room and use any kind of found objects. You know, as a kid, you can't go buy things, so if there was foil or Ziploc bags or sticks or something and yarn, I would kind of go collect those around the house and go create something. So from a very young age, I was just always into creating things. And another big influence on becoming an artist, I suppose, from a young age was my dad worked a lot, so when we would go on vacation as a family, he would bring a $1 watercolor set from the art store, and we would go and act like artists out in plein air and be painting, and that was something we did, just the two of us, and it was very influential because he would come home and we would show everybody everything that we painted through the day, and he would always tell me how great of an artist I was, and so as a kid that's very encouraging to hear. And then looking back on that, it's kind of funny to look back and see those paintings, and they're not the best, but Dad thinks they are, so that's important. So yeah, so that's kind of how from a very young age I was really encouraged. So it started out in watercolors, and as I grew up, realizing watercolors probably one of the hardest mediums to really use, because it's more of a minimalist markings on what paper or whatever you're using to watercolor with. And so it became a really big challenge. I took a few after-school classes on how to do it in high school, and it's something that when I travel, which travel influences a lot of the art that I do, I take a travel watercolor set with me. So I have this little set here, and it folds out, has these little cubes of paint that you can kind of swap out. So I take that with me. But as I've gotten older, I've started collecting art supplies. So I called myself an art supply collector for a long time, until I really found the time to dig into it, and really got into acrylics. Partly because they were less expensive than oils, and I have a little bit of impatience with it, and with oils took a lot longer. Currently, most of what I do is acrylic. When I travel, I do watercolor. It sets up very fast, and it's very dependent on the conditions that you're in. So if you're outside and it's a hot day, it's going to dry really fast. I recently took a class with a local artist, Paula McCarty, and she is amazing, and she taught me a little trick that you can bring these little water bottles and keep it wet, and that keeps things going a little bit longer. You can also buy paint extenders to kind of extend the length of time that the paint takes to set. But yeah, I think working quickly and knowing what direction you want to take the piece in with acrylic and watercolor technically. And then, like I said, watercolor for me is more of a minimalist additive, so you're making small marks and layering them, and they're transparent, so you have to really consider what's below it because it's going to show through. Whereas my acrylic, I do layer it as well, and that's something that I really love to do, is to take and be more abstract about whatever I'm doing, and more looking at the values of, you know, this side of the flower is lighter and the other side is darker or whatever, and just kind of transforming it in a different way. So I guess watercolor and acrylic can be very different, but they both are very time sensitive, which is a challenge. I would say lots of color, whether it's a watercolor that I do or acrylic painting. I like to use every color that there is. In fact, on my Instagram account, a lot of my paintings I hashtag with all the colors because I try to really max them out. I think it makes the painting happy when you use a lot more colors, even if it doesn't quite make sense that, you know, something's there versus the real color. A lot of people ask me, oh, well, what kind of flower is this, or what kind of flower is that? And most of them are just sort of made up flowers that resemble flowers. They're not necessarily supposed to look like a rose or an iris or something, but might sort of appear to be close to that. This is not my day job. I actually do have a day job, so most of the artwork that I do is either of an evening or on weekends, and it is something that I love to do, so I spend quite a bit of time doing it. So I would come home and make dinner, or on a weekend wake up, have breakfast, and typically put some music on, and that could vary. I listen to all sorts of different music, or even podcasts. I've gotten really into podcasts while I do double duty here, learn something and paint. And so, and then I get to work, and I recently had a friend of mine want me to paint her a painting, and a lot of times I'll try to just carve out a couple hours or an hour here or there each day. And it turned into like me painting till like 2 a.m. and I had to work the next day, so it is something that just kind of can carry you away when you get really into it. I recently did a bike ride down the West Coast for 3 weeks and ended up telling people that if they donated to the ride, the Fuller Center that I was riding for, that I would paint them a painting as a thank you for their donation. So I have a few of the watercolors that I painted as I was riding along the coast, and so I will send these out, and then a few other just kind of fun experimental type watercolors mostly that I have been working on, that I will send people and kind of write a little thank you on the back saying thank you for the donation. So that's the other thing that I have really enjoyed, because they're small and I can do them usually in a day and send them off and get a little people write back and say, you know, usually how much they enjoy the painting. So that's been a fun kind of daily thing, that practice I've been doing. I've recently had some friends ask for me to do paintings, and it's really hard to do commission work, because as much as, you know, they have an idea of what people want and what you have an idea of what you want and can do or capable of, can sometimes be very different. And I had a friend who wanted me to paint her something, and oh, I want this abstract painting, but I don't want it to be this color, I want it to be that color, because she kind of showed me something that she was looking at and thinking of doing, and that was actually the one I ended up staying up super late working on, because I just got really into it. So I think as much of a challenge as it was, and that is sort of why I paint. It is a new challenge for me every time I put paintbrush to canvas or paper. It is always a new challenge. But in the end, she really loved it. I just said, okay, I'm going to stop working on it at this point, and I want you to come and have a look at this, and if you love it, you have to take it home with you. And and she did, so it worked out really well. And now she's hanging in her dining room, which is like such an honor. You know, I think that's like one of the best parts of being an artist is you're creating something that people want to look at every day. Like, you have to live with that in your dining room every single day. And even at the Art Expo last year, when I had some people buy my art and then they sent me photos of it hanging up in their home, that is such an honor. I'm like so absolutely humbled by that, that you would put something on your walls because you have such limited wall space, and something that, like I said, you want to look at this every day is so cool. So I think that's one of the best things about being an artist, is creating something that people want to look at every day. We only have so much time in life, and you know, you want to be able to put things in the world that are worthwhile and not just because you want to do them. So taking the time to think about what is something that I would love to have, or you know, probably somebody else who likes what I do would love to have, spending the time to create a piece of art that has that on there, and then having to literally mark up the canvas, this brand new canvas. So I really just started taking any color and coating the whole canvas with it, anything but white, and that's led into some pretty cool experiments too with different backgrounds for my art, so that I've left instead of kind of painting over entirely. I would really like to get into a new medium, so oils, and I really have an interest in painting people, like portraiture. So I have actually taken a few classes on portraiture, and it's such a challenge. The values that are all over people's faces, and the textures that people have, you know, with their hair and their noses and their ears and everything. So I think people are next, but it's kind of a mountain of a challenge for me, and it's not like a flower where you can kind of make it up. You kind of want people to have a liking to who they are, sort of. I guess Picasso kind of threw that out the window, so maybe I'll have my own view of portraiture, but yeah. So, and maybe add a lot of the color in. I think that's something that I'd like to kind of add lots of color into a portrait and kind of take that into play.